Hi, my name is Feno Kadia, and I work at the Institute of Economic Affairs as an economic researcher. So today I wanted us to discuss about teacher-student ratio in Kenya. As most of us are aware, the economic survey for 2026 is out, and it's loaded with a lot of data points that are important for just understanding our country dynamics. Now, when we look at education, it is one of the largest sectors, both socially and also economically. And as well, it is one of the country's biggest employers. So for us to start this conversation, I want us to divide the education sector into levels. And these levels would be pre-primary, primary inclusive of junior education, and then secondary and tertiary education. So as we all know, pre-primary education, which is the ECD level, is under the county government. And so when we hear the national government talking about the hiring of teachers, mostly they speak about the other levels, which is primary and secondary. And so junior high is inclusive of that. And so our discussion will be around those levels that the national government can actually affect. So the reason why teacher numbers actually matter is because of the education outcomes. So when you look at a teacher and the number of students that she or he caters to, the more students they have, the less time that each student has with the teacher, and so therefore that ends up affecting the instruction environment. And from an economic perspective, weak learning outcomes do indeed translate into a weaker human capital formation tomorrow. So let's look at the first point where the Kenya Kwanza administration, when it released its manifesto in 2022, they realized that there's a shortage of 116,000 teachers, and they wanted to fill this gap in 2 years. So 2 years would effectively be September 2024, but that target was not achieved. However, when we look at data from the 2026 economic survey, there actually has been progress. So for instance, in 2022, Kenya had a total of 221,510 primary school teachers. At that point, junior secondary school was had not yet been separated administratively. So today, when we combine the primary and junior secondary figures, the total number is 284,016 or 16. So this means that between 2022 and now, 62,506 additional teachers have been recruited. So the direction is quite positive. But then the bigger question is whether that pace has been sufficient. So according to UNESCO, the correct teacher-to-pupil ratio should be 1 to 25 learners. So the rationale is still the same. A smaller class size means that then we produce better learning outcomes. But Kenya is well above that threshold because in 2022, the teacher-to-student ratio was 1 to 47. Now it's 1 to 42. So you can see a bit of improvement, but there's still substantial staffing gaps. Now, looking at the total population of 11.9 million pupils, Kenya would still need to hire about 193,412 additional teachers to be able to meet this recommended ratio. So remember, if enrollment continues to increase, then therefore also the recruitment requirements will also increase further. But as well, what we need to know is that there are national differences because there are certain counties in this country in which the ratio is much higher. So you have like one teacher catering to about 50 students, right? But on the other hand, looking at just the national level, they've actually been a positive trend because since 2020 2020, the number of primary level teachers has increased by 30%, while at that time the students' numbers have increased by 17.3%. But then pre-primary level does tell us a different story, because the teachers in the pre-primary, which is ECD, has reduced by 14%, while the population of students has increased by 10%. So for the county government to be able to close this gap, they will need about 43,014 teachers. Now, I think as I conclude, the obvious policy recommendation that a lot of us have is that government should just hire more teachers, right? But again, going back to economic 2026 data, we can see that on average, on an annual average, the TSC, which is a Teacher Service Commission, this average salary is about 812,000 shillings. This is about 67,000 per month. So if we were to translate that and multiply that by the 193 teachers that I was talking about for primary and junior school that need to be hired in order to bridge this gap, it means that approximately the government would need about 157.16 billion. And this is huge, because equivalent to the current TSC wage bill, it would mean an additional 44% of the entire budget. So the policy challenge for us here is very clear, that Kenya needs more teachers to improve education outcomes, but then closing this gap at the required scale would also mean a very significant expansion of recurrent expenditure. And that is where now the real policy trade-offs are. So I hope by this short explanation, we now are able to understand just the position of teacher-pupil ratio in this country, where we're supposed to be, how many teachers we're supposed to hire, and how much it would cost the government in monetary terms to be able to do that.